Welcome back to Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here, live on remote from Cincy Comic-Con. I'll be here all weekend. And, man, I've got so many podcasts to crank out that this might be there might be more than one podcast coming to you live from Cincinnati. But, boy, what a busy last couple of weeks. I've done a lot of interviews. We're going to be cranking out a lot of shows in the month of September. I have a feeling it's going to bleed into October. This week, Marvel had two press conferences. One with Mark Waid and Tom Brevoort about the new book Champions that starts in October, with Mark rejoining his old partner on Impulse, Humberto Ramos. This is a team of the young new legacy superheroes. We've got Ms. Marvel, Miles Morales, the Totally Awesome Hulk, among others, young Cyclops from the original X-Men who's time traveled via Bendis. You know the whole shot. It sounds like a very interesting book, and Mark was very thorough, and Tom, about why these people were chosen and what we might expect from the Champions team in terms of why they are a team and their look at some of the conventions of superhero teams. Does it fit for what they want to do and what they want to say? Really interesting press conference, and proud to bring you that on Word Balloon. Then, happy to have Charles Soule back on Word Balloon, in addition to happy to have Jeff Lemire back on Word Balloon, along with Nick Lowe and Axel Alonso talking about the death of X. We all know Cyclops died at some point around Secret Wars. We never got the story because the time jumped 8 months into the future after Secret Wars. This story fills in the details. Death of X not only represents the death of Cyclops, but it's the prelude to the coming X-Men versus Inhumans war that is the next big event once this miniseries wraps up. So this is a chance for you to, if you haven't been paying attention to the Inhumans and X-Men, to get all informed and be ready for the next Marvel event. The press corps had a lot of questions for the creators and the editors, and it was a pleasure to be part of both press conferences, and I'm happy to bring them both to you today on Word Balloon. Word Balloon is brought to you by the League of Word Balloon listeners. Thank you, League, for your support. I'm hoping to meet some of you this weekend at Cincy Comic-Con. I know some of you have already said, hey, I'm going to be there. Good. Let me shake your hand and thank you personally for supporting Word Balloon as you do, because you really do a lot to make the connections possible. A lot of the funds that go into me going to the conventions and buying new equipment and networking with creators is going to pay off in the month of September. I don't want to tip anything until it's actually in the can and I'm ready to give it to you as far as the podcast goes. But really, the subscription support that the League of Word Balloon listeners give me allows me to go to these shows and make this stuff happen. So really, thank you, League of Word Balloon listeners. If you go to wordballoon.com, you'll find out all the information about my Patreon account. If you can afford it and think what I do here is worth your time, like I always like to say, you read a comic book, it takes about 10 or 15 minutes to read it. Well, Word Balloon usually comes up with at least 10 hours, usually more per month, of interesting conversation for you, and I'm happy to do it. So if you think it's worth your while, like I said, Word Balloon's free. If you can't afford it, I get it. I've struggled before in my 20s and my teens when I have no money. But if you think it's worth $1 a month, that would be great. Really do appreciate it. So thank you again. Go to wordballoon.com for the information or patreon.com/wordballoon. Word Balloon is also brought to you by InStock Trades at InStockTrades.com. Look at the books that are out this week from InStockTrades.com. My buddies Mike Norton and Tim Seeley, their trade paperback Volume 7 of Revival, called Forward, is 45% off, just $8.24. You can get Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips' Criminal, Wrong Time, Wrong Place, also Volume 7, also 45% off, $8.24. Good stuff from Roy Thomas and Ron Marz and others, Doctor Strange and the Secret Defenders. When is this from? I don't know, but that was back. They've got 11 comics here altogether. What a neat collection. 42% off, just $17.39. Late night last night. Forgive me, kids. I'm yawning while I'm talking. Eerie. Man, I love Creepy and Eerie. All the Warren reprints that Dark Horse has been doing. Tremendous stuff. Among the writers and artists, you'll find Bruce Jones, Larry Hama, Pablo Marcus, Paul Gulacy, Alfredo Alcala, my guy, one of my favorites, Jose Ortiz, And Frank Barberi does the introduction to Volume 22, which collects Erie 104 through 108. It is 42% off. 42% off, $28.99. Just a few of the great books you can find at InStockTrades.com. Don't take my word for it. Check out the website. You will find great deals on great books waiting for you at InStockTrades.com. All right, without further ado, we will hand things over to Chris DeLandro, the PR director for Marvel, who conducts these Marvel telephone press conferences. They're always interesting, and I think it's a great opportunity to hear directly from the directly from the creators what they think about the characters they're working on. Let's go back to Wednesday's Death of X press conference with Charles Soule and Jeff Lemire, Nick Lowe, and Axel Alonso, and the press corps talking to them about the Death of X, now on Word Balloon.
We'll just get started. So, when we came back from Secret Wars and the Marvel Universe jumped forward 8 months, one of the biggest questions, a lot of our fans had is sort of what the hell happened with the X-Men and the Inhumans. And, you guys have been teasing it out for months and months and months, and we're finally getting ready to peel back the curtain on that this October in Death of X, a 4-issue limited series written by Charles and Jeff and drawn by Aaron Cooter, who we're very excited to have at Marvel. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today and sort of how the series will dovetail into Inhumans vs. X-Men, which launches this December. So, as I mentioned before, with me today is our editor-in-chief, Axel Alonso, executive editor Nick Lowe, along with Charles Soule and Jeff Lemire. So we'll just get right into it. My first question for you guys is, as I teased out before, reading both of your titles coming out of Secret Wars, you really got the feeling that a lot more had gone on in that 8-month gap than either the X-Men or the Inhumans were really willing to talk about openly. So, both sides are really in a Cold War right now that's sort of about to erupt when we get to Inhumans vs. X-Men. But what can you guys sort of tell us about the tensions between the groups? What sparks that sort of conflict in the pages of Death of X?
Well, I think that your use of the Cold War analogy is dead on, because what we wanted it to feel like was, like as in the Cold War, like that annihilation was sort of around the corner. There's always this cloud lying over everything, and in this case, it is a literal cloud, if you'll forgive me. There is there's this substance in the air and the atmosphere that is central to the Inhuman way of life called Terrigen, and unfortunately, it looks like that same substance is deadly to mutants. So we wanted it to feel like an intractable conflict, and just like at any minute this could erupt into doom. And wanted to suggest that we'd gotten there through something really, really intense that had happened before we opened both of our stories. And so I don't speak too much. I can let Jeff jump in there if he wants to.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think at this point it's pretty common knowledge, having read the books for almost a year now, that something really, really important happened involving Cyclops, and he's dead. Clearly, that's one of the central things we're exploring in Death of X, exactly how that happened, what it means for both Inhumans and X-Men. But we don't want to spoil that, obviously, here. But, I think this Cold War sort of aspect has been, there's various factions within both Inhumans and the X-Men. So there's not like one sort of blanket sort of way that all the X-Men react this way to it. All the Inhumans have reacted this way to the war. There's different factions within the mutants, for instance, who are all kind of, thinking differently towards the Inhumans and towards this conflict. So, you have Storm's team that I'm writing. They're sort of trying to coexist, trying to save as many mutants as they can, but also try to find a way to move forward in Inhumans. When you have Magneto's team, which is a lot more proactive and a lot more aggressive, and then Dennis Hopeless is writing the young X-Men who are still trying to find a way just to be heroes and a way to just live their lives and sort of be young in the landscape of the Marvel Universe. So when we see the conflict finally erupt, it won't be one face for the whole group. We'll see these various factions represented, and they'll have sort of different motivations and different sort of angles.
I think it's also worth saying that both sides in this fight see themselves as heroic. I mean, nobody really wants to be fighting this fight. It's something they've been pushed into by circumstance, which is very difficult for everyone. I mean, the Inhumans and the X-Men they would rather be saving the world rather than fighting another group of people who are trying to save the world. But, the situation is very tense. It's very, like I said, it's intractable. There's really, neither one of them sees an easy way out, and they're on a collision course. And in Death of X, we see how they first realized that, how bad the problem really was, how much of a collision course they really were on, and what it would be like if they really finally sort of smashed into each other.
Hey, this is Axel, just chiming in real quick, just to sort of talk the macro here. Death of X is a story that stands on its own 2 feet. It's a full story. It's its own read. It fills in the gaps between what the end of Secret War and where we picked up with Extraordinary X-Men and all the X books post-Secret War. So all the questions that readers have had about where is Cyclops, where's Emma Frost, and so on, all those questions are going to be answered, and the answers are going to be pretty darn shocking. You'll see the first sort of recognition that perhaps Inhumans and mutants can't all get along, can't live on the same planet in this series. But it really functions as a prelude to the war, which comes in IVX. I'd call this is a battle, but it's not the war. But you will understand by the end of this series why it is inevitable that mutants and Inhumans will go to war.
I wanted to talk a little bit about Cyclops, but I think we can circle back to that because Jeff, you mentioned something earlier about sort of factioning of the X-Men, that they don't all necessarily agree with one unified point of view. And when we saw your book when it launched, Storm's team you saw them sort of rejecting Scott's actions, which Death of X will cover to an extent. The actions he took against the Inhumans. With Death of X sort of flashing back and filling in those gaps, are we going to sort of see that play out on the page?
Yeah, that's exactly right. You'll see, we're going back 8 months before my first issue, so we'll see these teams of the X-Men teams that we see now in the Marvel Universe weren't in existence yet. It was a different landscape. So we'll see what kind of caused the teams that we have now to sort of form and fracture off, and that all stems back from the actions of Cyclops and a few other mutants, which, as Axel alluded to, I think are a lot more shocking and surprising than most readers can guess at this point.
Yeah, Charles, on your end of things, when we picked your book up, we saw, Beast had joined the Inhumans, which was kind of a shocking twist. Crystal's taking her team out on sort of a goodwill mission to sort of bolster support for the Inhumans. How does Death of X fill in those blanks on your side?
Well, again, we really wanted it to feel like something really significant had happened prior to the start of the Inhuman series that wasn't going to be. None of those things necessarily would have happened if something very intense hadn't occurred in the Inhuman world. And so, it's all part of building up the anticipation for Death of X and really making the question mark seem as large as possible, so that people really want to know, how we got there. It's clear that Beast, left the mutants and is working with the Inhumans. Not everybody on the mutant side is happy about that. Not everybody on the Inhuman side is thrilled about that, because it's sort of, like having a spy in your midst almost. Some people would accuse him of being, he's his best to solve this problem with the Cloud and all of that stuff, but it's tough. And as far as Crystal, who is the sister of the Queen, she has been sent out into the world to try and, make sure that if a war does erupt again, there's a lot of sort of goodwill that the Inhumans have been generating around. And, they're trying to get as many people on their side as possible. So it's all part of building up to the feeling of inevitability, right? These sides are going to come together again in a huge battle, which we're going to see in IVX. But we wanted to make it feel earned. Wanted to make everybody understand how we got there, and that is the point of the Death of X story, which is great stuff.
So I also wanted to make sure we highlighted Aaron Cooter, who's going to be drawing the series, and for press on the call, I sent around some of the first interior pages, as well as all 4 of his covers, which just look tremendous. we're really excited to have him, at Marvel. What do you guys think he brings to the project? And Axel, for you, what sort of excites you about having him here?
Actually, if you don't mind,
Nick.
This is Nick Lowe talking. Getting Aaron over here has been a labor of love over the last several years. There have been secret breakfasts at, not secret, but breakfast at San Diego for years, as I've been a fan of Aaron's for a long time, and so have a lot of us up here at Marvel. And we're so glad to see him take on this book and to bring his A-plus game to it. He is turning in the best work of his career, and it's going to make people jump out of their chairs and be like, "Who's this guy again?" The first issue is stunning. He's almost done with the second issue right now, and he is a superstar about to burst on the scene. You don't want to miss looking at his work.
Charles, Jeff, anything on your end?
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, one of the things about this book, Death of X, is that there's a lot of Inhumans and there's a lot of X-Men. There's a lot of characters in it. And one of the things that can get, I think, in my experience as a superhero comic reader, some of that you can lose the emotional content sometimes because you're focusing on just making sure that, a character looks the way they're supposed to look and they're doing what the story asks them to do and so on. But the amazing thing about Aaron's work on this series is that he's not only achieving that, so everybody looks the way they're supposed to look, all the millions of characters are correct, but also there's a strong emotional content to everyone on the scenes. You know what they're feeling and why they're acting the way they are. And even more than that, he's innovating in the way that these things are presented. So it looks like a fresh take on one of these big superhero battles. It's very, very impressive, and I am so glad Aaron is drawing it. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I think Aaron's one of those artists who he's not so much an artist as he is a cartoonist, and by that I mean he's a really, really, really strong, gifted storyteller. It's almost like he could, it's almost having a third writer on the book because he brings so much to the way he interprets the script and how to best communicate our ideas and sort of he's really strong in that aspect as well. So, you add that to what Charles said about the way he just sort of adds so much emotion to the characters and how much detail and intricacy he puts into the line work and everything. He really is a star. He's great. I've been a fan of his for a while, too. When he first came to DC, when I was back there as well, he was someone you immediately had a point of view, and his work was immediately different and striking, and he seems to have elevated it yet again here.
Before we open it up to press, I just wanted to, address sort of the elephant in the room about the book, which is, we're going to really get to see Cyclops and Emma Frost for the first time in about a year. I mean, since before Secret Wars ended, as this book sort of sets the stage for Inhumans versus X-Men in December. Excuse me. Is there anything you guys can talk about getting to write them and having them back on the scene and sort of seeing how they respond to this Terrigen threat?
Well, I mean, I've been writing the X-Men for about a year now, and it did kind of feel like something was missing because Cyclops, Scott, and Emma are so important to the mutant sort of corner of the Marvel Universe. Not getting a chance to write either of them until now, it did feel like something was missing, so this kind of feels like I don't know, it feels like kind of coming full circle and finally getting to that missing piece for me as well creatively. So I think it would probably feel that way for the reader as well.
Emma is one of my favorite characters in all of the X-Men canon. So I'm just getting to write her at all is awesome. So I'm having a blast with her. And Cyclops too. He has such a point of view and such a he so many changes over his life as a character that he's very rich to write. A lot of emotion in every line he delivers. It's very cool.
And I just want to talk a little bit about before we open, like you said, to the press. I'm so excited for this book to finally get out there with people. It's been something we've been planning for so long. I mean, pretty much the day Jeff signed on to do the X-Men, we've been meeting and talking about this and about IVX for so long, and it's been such a joy to work with Charles and Jeff and to see their talents pool up and what they bring out of each other and bring this huge story to bear with both giant, important moments, but with incredibly personal, emotional moments as well. And that accompanied by Aaron's art, I just cannot wait for this to be in everybody's hands.
So yeah, with that, I'm going to open it up to our press. So we'll start and we'll go around, and we should have time for at least 2 questions apiece, maybe more, depending on time. CBR, Brett.
Yeah, Jeff and Charles, you're both co-writing this book, and to my knowledge, you guys haven't really co-written with a lot of other writers during your time at Marvel. So I was wondering if you could talk about the process of working together on this.
It's pretty seamless. I think it would always be different depending who you're working with. But Charles and I seem to. Charles may disagree, but it seems like a very, very easy collaboration. We kind of, especially the important thing is that sort of going into it, the easy way to divide the work was that I do stuff that's more X-focused. Charles does stuff that's more Inhumans-focused, and that's kind of how we started. But then now it's sort of, as we've gotten more comfortable working with each other after the first issue or two, we just kind of, whoever kind of is more excited for one scene or seems to have the most energy for it, we just kind of split it up that way, and it's pretty effortless. We seem to be no big fights yet.
Yeah, we'll see.
Not that I can speak of.
Right. There's lots of getting on the phone and lots of emailing. And there's a lot of letting the ideas simmer and gestate before we put them down on the page. Which I think has just been very, very good. I have immense respect for Jeff. I have no idea how he feels about me, but I think he's a real talent. And so I think that when we started the project with that sort of feeling towards each other, it makes it a lot easier to let the good ideas start to come out. Nobody really has anything. We don't have anything to prove to each other. It's just about getting the best story we can.
George, Newsarama.
Hey, this is Chris. I wanted to ask, it seems like the two primary members on the X-Men side seem to be Cyclops and Emma. Who would you say are kind of the equivalent on the Inhuman side, if you had to pick two, and kind of what is their specific motivations here?
I would say it's Medusa for sure, and then I think Crystal probably.
I think Crystal plays a pretty big role in it. Yeah.
Yeah, Medusa and Crystal.
Yep. And for them, as far as their motivation goes, the Terrigen is a huge part of Inhuman society and a hugely important part of what makes them who they are and what gives them their power and all that kind of stuff. So anytime the Terrigen is involved in a big situation, the Inhumans are going to jump to its defense if they possibly can.
If I could add one thing to that question, too, aside from the main players that we've discussed, I think another fun thing about the series, Death of X series, is that we get to see we get some pretty big roles for a couple of mutants who we haven't seen a lot of in the last few years, sort of characters who have kind of been off to the side, more obscure mutants, and likewise, we get a couple new Inhumans introduced that get pretty juicy roles as well. So it's not just the big guns. We've kind of found room to populate it and give some space to some more obscure characters and new characters as well, which I think creates a pretty good balance.
James.com.
Hey guys. So look, back when Uncanny X-Men 600 ended, we saw Cyclops gain a bit of peace of mind after his time as a revolutionary. Does this march to war against the Inhumans build on or push back against sort of that idea and character moment for Cyclops?
Well, I think the big thing to remember there is that something really huge happens between the end of Brian Bendis' run in 600 and our story, and that's that the Terrigen, the discovery that the Terrigen is poisonous to mutants, and that immediately changes everything for Scott, well, for everyone, but especially for Scott in this series, because you're right, he was starting to come to a point where he was trying to find some peace of mind, but then this, as we'll see in the series, I don't want to spoil anything, but this is so sort of seismic that it kind of pushes back against that and changes everything.
Yeah, what happens in Death of X1 makes it necessary for Cyclops to do what he does next.
You'll totally understand why he changes his mind.
Yeah, and Emma's a big part of that too. So,
Joshua, IGN.
Hey guys, I'm curious to hear, how did you come up with the story title Death of X, and why did you name it that?
I don't know. That's sort of something that wasn't just Charles and I. That was more, editorial as well was involved. So maybe Nick or Axel could speak to that one.
Death of X it became once the beats of the story started revealing themselves. Yeah, and once they started building it out, we always try to find out what's the best way to market it, what's the best way to name it. And Death of X just seemed to fit. You'll understand as you read the story. I don't want to give too much away. But this is a very, very important moment for the X-Men. It's really tough to understate that here. And we live in an age where it's really hard to keep story beats secret and to keep a lockdown on things. And there's a lot of series that is like that. So I don't want to talk too much about it, but it was just it was a cool title that fit, and so we made it a huge marketing platform for a lot of our stuff, all the variant covers and all that kind of stuff.
John, word balloon.
I mean,
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, you heard Death of X. Don't you want to read it? It might just be as simple as that, too, right?
John.
Hey, guys. I'm interested, without spoiling, to hear both of you comment on what might be on the Beast, Hank McCoy's mind, and, of course, the Human Torch, Johnny Storm's mind.
Yeah, actually, they play pretty. I don't want to spoil too much, but I would say that the two characters you pointed out play really, really big roles in IVX, maybe more so than Death of X.
Okay.
But, I don't know how much you want to spoil about that.
I think Beast is, Hank he's somebody he's always trying to find a way to think his way through problems. And so he'll fight when he has to, but he would much rather use his brain to solve a problem. And this feels like a problem to him that he should be able to solve with his mind. And so, we'll see how that works out. Obviously he hasn't solved by the time the story starts. After, so it doesn't get solved in Death of X because he's there in New Avalon trying to work things through. As far as the Human Torch, he is Medusa's boyfriend. Seems like kind of a small word, or whatever you want to say. The guy she's palling around with, and so he brings a lot of loyalty to Medusa for sure, but he's also not an Inhuman. And so his perspective on this is from somebody who can see the conflict from kind of a step back or step away. Which I think is a very valuable perspective to have in one of these big, huge stories. So,
and I would say like the addition of Beast and then Human Torch to Uncanny Inhumans at the end of Secret Wars was one of the biggest kind of shockers out of the gate with that book. And so this kind of paves the way for both. One, it sets up a problem for Beast to study, and on his side of things, and on the Torch's side, as you remember when he stepped in, he was also there to kind of help the Inhumans with PR, and this kind of tells you why did they need PR help? This kind of lays all that out because this Death of X stuff kind of brings the Inhumans into a very different position on the other side of it than they were at the beginning.
Brett, CBR.
Yeah, Deb, you said you've talked much about how Death of X is leading into Inhumans versus X-Men. So this is a huge, huge, massive story. So I'm wondering, in working on Death of X, has anything changed in what you might do with Inhumans versus X-Men, since it's still a bit further down the road?
Oh yeah. I would say, and I'll shut up and let you guys talk. But I would say, I remember there was one pretty major difference from our initial plan for Death of X, that as we were mapping out Death of X and starting to map out IVX, there was a huge change that we may not have landed on had it weren't be for those initial planning meetings for IVX. But that's one of the cool things about working on these two events in tandem was that the one could inform the other as we worked on them.
Yeah, we had a dedicated IVX retreat with pretty much everyone that's on the phone right now attending, where we locked ourselves up for a couple of days in a room and just walked ourselves through that story. And we kept referring back to Death of X, and I'll back to Nick there. Yeah.
Yeah, they both kind of evolved together. I mean, I think Nick said earlier that when I first came aboard Marvel and with the X-Men, which was probably a year and a half ago now or something, this story was in the works right from then. So it's been percolating and building and kind of evolving for a long time. So it's gone through a lot of changes, and the more concrete Death of X became, the more it helped us figure out IVX. Obviously, the more detail we got into on Death of X, the more it could sort of launch new ideas for IVX. So yeah, they kind of worked in tandem that way, and it's a good way to work.
Chris, Newsarama.
Going big picture, many fans look at the X-Men titles from like the 70s, 80s, and 90s being like one of, if not the biggest titles that Marvel is doing. Since kind of the reemergence of kind of the Avengers line to kind of become that centerpiece from Marvel, is there any kind of inside kind of team effort to like put like the X-Men like back front and center in Marvel by getting more interest and like raising sales with something like this and getting more titles again?
I mean, we're always trying to tell the best stories we possibly can and put the best creators, hence people you're talking to on the phone, who are two of the biggest writers in comics right now, working on these events.
We keep getting asked these questions, and there's a point at which it gets a little bit irritating because it's a little bit insulting to the people that are working on the books. I mean, we've had some of our best talent working on the X-Men books over the last few years. We continue to pull out events. One of our biggest events of the last few years was Avengers versus X-Men. We have interest in all of our franchises here in publishing. We want to put them all forward and make them all popular. Again, we didn't lock ourselves in a room for 3 days because we're disinterested in the X-Men. That said, I don't think we could speak more specifics because we don't want to give away anything. If we say anything more, in answering some of your question, I give away where we land after IVX, and I don't want to do that right
now. James, comicbook.com.
Cool. So, I know you guys talked a bit about, wanting to, or how you wanted to tell the story as far as, the event not happening right immediately after Secret Wars, and but was that ever sort of part of the discussion as far as let's do this immediately after Secret Wars, or was it integral to the storytelling, and is that something that we may see in a similar fashion with IVX, as the build-up goes there with the fallout of Death of X?
Well, I think one of the big things that doing the 8-month gap and sort of jumping ahead and not seeing the Death of X stuff right away gave us was a real sense of mystery when we launched our titles, which I thought was really intriguing, and it made the books more compelling. And I don't think we wouldn't have had that if we had just done the Death of X story right out of Secret Wars. So I think breaking things up and playing with time like that can be a good thing, and it kind of create fresher stories and just doing stuff in more fashion.
We've everyone on this call has been reading comics books for a long time, and we're all fans, right? And part of the fun of being a fan of comics is talking amongst yourselves about what the hell happened in some situation or another, right? So by doing it this way, by setting it up like this huge thing that happened, we've given the fans quite a long time to talk amongst themselves and try and figure out what happened, put their theories out there, and I just think it makes it more fun. So now we'll pull the curtain back and we'll see who is.
Yeah, it was always the plan to take our time and tell this story. I mean, that when at the end of Secret Wars, when we did the 8 month later jump, we had a whole bunch of stuff we wanted to do to take advantage of that 8 months and do something different and try to give our fans something different and new to enjoy and a different way to read the books. And these story elements were a big part of it. The Sky Spears in Uncanny Inhumans and in All New Inhumans are another one that it's like, if you think you've waited a long time for this one, like the story that Charles has planned for that, and like where they're going to pay off like that's even more. So like there's big plans for all this kind of stuff, and so it was always planned for this to come later and to lead directly into IVX. Like IVX, we planned from the same time we started planning Death of X. It's all like it's a 1-2 punch.
Joshua, IGN.
Hey, because this is happening right after Secret Wars, will we hear any or see any fallout from that event? Because in that event, Cyclops died, so really this is Death of X 2. Is he going to, be like, not again?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. He just screams, not again.
That's it.
That's really all our issues.
Story? Is that the end?
Aaron drew a really long gatefold that we're just printing. But I mean, I think it would take more than this one phone call to kind of dig into exactly Jonathan Hickman's machinations for how the time worked for the things right before, during, and after Secret Wars. Maybe we'll hook you guys up to talk about that and go through a timeline. But this was this was in the cards since we knew Secret Wars was coming. We knew that after Secret Wars we were going to do a big shake-up, and that's why we brought Jeff into the X-Men. That's why we paired him and Charles, who's our lead Inhumans guy, together to tell this story, to make it as organic as possible. You won't see what happens in this story coming. As much as there are certain things that have to happen into it, there's about twice as many surprises.
And you might be surprised by what doesn't happen as well.
Indeed.
John, word balloon.
Well, that sort of answers my question, but I want to ask it in a different way and ask, knowing that the death of Cyclops was the, inevitable end here, was it freeing to write Cyclops after the choices he's already made, or the burden of his choices led to a singular path?
That's a really good question.
It is a good question. I'm not sure.
Axel, you want to jump in?
Personally, I felt a lot of responsibility just because Scott's such a beloved character and such an important character in the history of Marvel, that to be the one of the two writers to sort of craft a story about his death, that's a lot of responsibility. It's not something we took lightly, for sure. And I think a little bit of both of what you said. I think there is a sense of, there's a sense of freedom to finally tell the story that we've been teasing for a long time, but there's also that sense of, I don't know if it's burden, but responsibility to do it right.
Yeah, I'm sort of having Death of Wolverine flashbacks to an extent as we're working on these stories, because it's a story that's going to be very impactful to the X universe in a lot of ways, and you definitely want to make sure that you're doing justice to every character involved. To Emma, Storm, all the X people, and all the Inhumans. There's a lot of legacy there you want to make sure you're treating properly.
Yeah, I'll also say too is that this story really examines the imprint that a hero has on other people's lives, the effect that it has on other people's lives and decisions they make, and their morality. Yeah, I think Cyclops has always been someone he's inspired humankind in so many different ways, and that is something we'll see echoed in this series big time.
And he's been such a galvanizing figure in so many ways since he was created, basically, especially since the Claremont Byrne years of some people always loved Cyclops, some people hated him, and it's so interesting. That's one of the things that makes him such an interesting character, and this story is no exception to how interesting Cyclops can be.
Brett, CBR.
Yeah, we talked a lot about Cyclops, and Emma Frost is kind of the other half of, the major X character that has been missing for a while. And you guys have already spoken a little bit about how much you like the character, but I'm wondering if we can get any insight into where her mind is at as maybe the beginning of Death of X, since I know you guys can't tell us where it's at the end of it.
No, we can't talk about Emma at all. I don't think. I can't see how we can.
Yeah, she like I said, she's pretty much one of our favorite characters. I think her becoming a member of the X-Men, what is it now, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, something like that, was such a huge moment in all X fans. And so getting her back on the stage here as we go into Death of X-Men was just great to see her again. But once you see what happens in Death of X #1, you'll kind of get a better idea of how she and how Cyclops react to how deep this situation, how dangerous the situation for mutants on Earth is right now.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think she's, especially in this story, she's tragic, which I hope doesn't give anything away. But she's like, there's a lot of I don't think there's any accident that she turns herself into a diamond as her sort of secondary education. She makes herself very, very hard, and sort of to feel or show other people that she's feeling anything. But in this story, we really get past that, and we see a lot of what makes her tick and what matters to her, and why she makes the choices she makes. Not just in this story, but in a lot of other stories that we've seen her do things. So it's very intense. I think Emma has one of the best stories in the whole arc. I mean, lots of characters do, but she's a real standout for me anyway.
Yeah, I think just following that, I think Emma may not have been a part of the X-Men books in the last year, but when we're done with this story, she's going to be a huge part of things moving forward, and I think that was one of our goals, is to really, really make her super important to everything going forward. She becomes a really key character.
Chris, who's wrong?
I wanted to ask about the other Cyclops that's floating around the Marvel Universe. He's in the X-Men books. He's in the upcoming Champions book. That's from all that we can see, he makes it out the other end of this. But does he have a major role to play in the Death of X series?
That's not really the other Cyclops in Champions. It's Mystique. Am I supposed to spoil that here?
Spoiler.
Yeah. He's got a bigger role in IVX than he has in Death of X.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the young X-Men that Dennis Hopeless is writing, young Cyclops, and Jean, who's in my team, and young Beast, Angel, they are in Death of X, but they play a much bigger role in IVX.
James, comicbook.com.
Charles and Jeff, how are you guys expecting in your respective parts to convert fans of the opposite team to be more empathetic with yours? So, Charles, are you hoping that you're able to make X-Men fans feel, be more sympathetic to Inhumans, and then Jeff, obviously, vice versa? And what are some of the things in the book that you think may do that, without spoiling anything, of course?
I don't think about that much. My job and what I like doing is making sure that the story that's being told is the absolute best story possible, because that's what gets you fans. It gets people on your side, if you want. I think the rivalry, if you want to say that there is one, is interesting because it gives people something to talk about. But ultimately, everybody just wants great stories and great comics, and that's what I'm planning to deliver. I think Jeff's going to do the same thing. So that's how I've always approached it. I think that's the only way we can approach it, really.
Yeah, I don't think it's the same with Charles. I don't often think of, this is going to sound terrible, I don't really think about the fans or what trying to give them something or whatever. It's more just trying to write the best story you can. And for us, that means trying to write both the Inhumans and the X-Men as, really well-rounded, multifaceted characters. And I think if we do that well, then it ends up achieving the other goal anyway. So.
But I think Jeff and Charles do agree that the goal is always to make it just a little bit worse than Avengers. That's the guiding principle.
Yeah. Well, we got those marching orders.
Yeah.
Joshua, IGN.
Because I guess of the secret nature of what happens in this story, you guys have not been able to really say much of anything about what's actually going to happen, obviously. But can you talk about what kind of story is this? What genre would you liken it to? Is it this big action adventure thing? Is it more intimate and dramatic? What kind of tone, what kind of story are we getting here?
Well, the biggest reference point that I we gave Aaron Cooter for issue 1, and the script was Alien, the Ridley Scott film. So I guess issue 1 to me felt like I was writing a horror book or a suspense book for sure. And then from there it gets a bit bigger, but that's how it started.
Yeah, I would say that's exactly the word I was going to use. I was going to say a horror story, and or a very, very tense psychological thriller, something like that. And it certainly has the big scope that you want from a big, superhero event. It gets very big, lots of things blow up, lots of superpowers get used for sure, but it's really rooted in a very specific set of emotions that are being felt. And again, I don't necessarily want to spoil what those emotions are, but that's the tone. I would say it's just very intense. It's like you've got a ratchet that's grinding tighter and tighter with every minute, every issue. So by the end, it's great. I like it.
And just to follow up real quick, it's because it's so it's like an intense horror story. Is it more focused on small groups of characters, or is it pretty much everybody?
Well, I mean, both teams, both sort of sides of the equation are so huge that you can't possibly tell a good story if you try to include everybody. So I think there's sort of a core group on each side that in Death Effects anyway, that we've sort of drilled in on and focused in on. Obviously Scott and Emma, we've already mentioned, but a couple other characters, Magic plays a pretty big part. A couple unexpected characters like Goldballs and a few others played pretty big roles, and it's the same for Charles. So we kind of focused in on a core group on each side for this story anyway. But we will see, you do see a lot of other characters. They just don't play huge roles.
This story builds.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, go ahead. We're good. I think Jeff kind of laid it out.
This story builds as it goes along, and then at the crescendo of this, it's a battle, like Axel said before. This is a battle, and then when you get to IVX, that's the war. That is. That's where things get huge. This is manageable. That one is where all bets are off, and it really gets crazy.
Charles, do you have something to add?
No, I think Jeff and Nick pretty much took care of it.
John, word balloon.
Axel and Nick, and again, I understand that this story explains Cyclops' death, sets up the Inhumans versus X-Men story to come. But we just had Hawkeye kill Bruce Banner, and James Rhodes just died. Axel first, I wonder, because I think there are some outsiders that will go, hey, look, here's another death. Is there a concern from an editorial standpoint that death in these stories might be overused? Or, do you examine event to event, a macro question, the necessity to have a death in these events?
I think that it's something we explore in every story, and there have been times when we haven't decided to opt for a death or anything close to that. I would also take a look at, if you take a look at the Marvel Universe now, we've imported a lot of cool characters onto the table right now. They seem to be gelling with the audience, both new and old. So I don't see the Marvel Universe as shrinking. I don't think we're killing off characters and we're getting smaller. I think we're getting bigger, and I think we're getting more interesting. And as you know, dead is dead in comics. We all know what can happen down the road. The art. This is a common trope of comic books. Everybody that reads comic books knows this is one of the things that makes our art form unique. Is that you can do this. And what matters is that you sell the story. Now, that said, we have no plans to bring Cyclops back if, in fact, we're prepared to kill him in the first place. So.
Well, you've got a young Cyclops, so I mean that's already conveniently taken care of. I mean, you have a clean Scott now that isn't damaged by the choices old Scott made.
Yeah, and will, of course, be haunted by the choices of his predecessors. So, yeah.
And if I could jump in real quickly, it was one of the things that I think it can often appear from the outside. But I've been here for a long time at Marvel, and one of the best things that I've seen about how we craft these events and craft these stories, there isn't a checklist that we have. Like, okay, here's the event checklist, boom, on the wall, here are things that happen. Every time the story comes up, anytime someone suggests a character dies, it goes through a whole rigmarole of reasons. Like, cause we'd rather not, to be completely honest with you. I mean, you can go back to Second Coming when Nightcrawler died. Like, we went through this whole rigmarole. Like, was it necessary to the story? If it's not necessary to the story, it doesn't happen. That is the same thing that any character death in any of these stories that we're talking about now happen. Like, we really don't do it willy-nilly or easily. And there are many times where probably the frustration of writers like Jeff or Charles, where like they'll want to do something like, no thanks, we can't do it. No, we don't want to do it. It's not necessary. But I think you'll see some compelling arguments made over the course of this story, Death of X and IVX. And I just hope people understand that we don't just do deaths for the sake of deaths. It has to be for the good of the story.
There was to that end, there was a pretty major death that was sort of talked about a bit in IVX. Just like Nick said, it became obvious as we got into the story that it just wasn't necessary, and it wouldn't have added anything, and it would have just been a death for the sake of a shock, and so it's not happening. So there's a lot of times that you guys don't see that these things do get discussed, and it's not just done for the sake of doing it.
Sure.
Brett, CBR.
Yeah, I'm wondering. Death of X so far is a limited series, but I'm wondering, are there going to be other tie-ins? Are we going to get to see? Is there going to be like a Death of X banner on Extraordinary or Uncanny Inhumans or anything like that?
No.
Or is it just really self-contained to this one story?
Yeah, this Death of X is self-contained to the 4 issues.
I can confirm that there will be tie-ins for IVX, and we'll be, announcing some more information about
for IVX,
in the coming weeks.
Yeah, but not like Jeff said. Death of X is self-contained, 4-issue, closed story.
Yeah, you don't even necessarily have to have read any I or X, Inhuman or X-Men stuff to get it. Like we've taken great pains to read, to make sure that people who maybe aren't reading Inhumans books or aren't reading X books will be able to jump right in and get it immediately. And honestly, the same is true of IDX. So it's, that's something that I think you really have to do with these bigger stories, is make them friendly to new readers as much as you do to the readers.
It's true. I still haven't read any Inhumans books, so.
Yep. They're super good, Jeff. You'd really like them.
All right. I think we got time for maybe one more. Chris, Newsarama, you want to finish this out?
Sure. Let's talk a little bit more about Aaron Cooter, the recent signee to the exclusive. Since he's doing 4 issues over 2 months, can you kind of tell us how early of a start he got on this, and how far ahead is he on this, since they're going to be coming out pretty fast this winter?
I mean, Aaron's been working on this for, I think since March, April, something like that, I believe.
Yeah, something like that.
And he's moving along at a really good clip. His work is just incredible. I'm telling you, this book will push him so high in the stratosphere. People are literally not ready for it, and that goes with, and like we got Maury Hollowell coloring him on this book as well. If you've read the original Civil War series, you know Maury's work really well. So we wanted to make sure we put our biggest talent on this book, and so it's. Aaron is quickly becoming that, and Maury and the colors is part of that as well.
With that, I think we're just about out of time. But I wanted Charles, Jeff, I want to thank you guys very much for taking time out of your day, and Axel and Nick as well. So what everybody said. If Death of X is the first battle in the coming war that you'll see in Inhumans versus X-Men. And you guys can check out Death of X #1, which will be out on October the 5th. First 2 issues should be out in October, and then the second 2 in November, and it'll lead us right into December's Inhumans versus X-Men. So Charles, Jeff, thank you guys again, and everybody who participated today, thank you guys very much for taking the time to chat with us, and I hope you guys check out the book on October 5th.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The leader has disconnected.
There you go. Talented creators tackling the X-Men and the Inhumans with Death of X. Very interesting conversation. I hope you enjoyed it. And now we will transition to another Marvel press conference, this one with Mark Waid, Tom Brevoort, talking about the new team champions and what their makeup will be like and their purpose for being a team. Really interesting stuff from Mark Waid and Tom Brevoort. Always love to hear Mark go on about characters. It's, a good chance to look inside his mind and what he thinks about certain things. And he's, playing with an interesting millennial crowd in Archie right now. Of course, he's had his other runs on teams like the Legion of Superheroes, and I even mentioned that when I get to ask a few questions. But it's always good to hear what Mark thinks of superheroes and superhero teams, and I think you get a good look at his perspective on this new team, the Champions. Mark Waid, Tom Brevoort, and the press asking Marvel these questions in another press telephone conference here on Word Balloon.
We're here to talk about Champions number 1. There's a new team hitting the streets of the Marvel Universe come October, post-Civil War II, and they are out to change the world. So, it's a brand new series from Mark and artist Humberto Ramos, who you may know from working on some other teen superheroes that we can't mention here. But
like the X-Men.
Making up the core of this team, you're going to see Ms. Marvel, Miles Morales, and Nova splinter off from their card-carrying Avengers status post-Civil War II. And making up the rest of his team are going to have a couple of interesting wild cards thrown into the mix. So that's Amadeus Cho, the totally awesome Hulk, young Cyclops, who Mark tells me is a personal favorite of his, and Viv Vision, who will be making her first appearance outside of the spectacular Tom King, Gabriel Walta, Jordi Belair series. So they're a new team. They're a completely different kind of team, and we're going to be talking about them a little bit today. So today I've got with me Mark Waid, obviously and Tom Brevoort, who will be editing the series. So let's just jump right into it, guys. I stated just now, and we've stated throughout the course of promoting this book that these kids are not Avengers, both in name and in mission statement. We're very fortunate to be able to call them champions. So how does how does their dynamic change as opposed to being normal Avengers or being your average sort of superhero team?
Well, I'll take that. I think that in the aftermath of Civil War II, which again, not giving anything away, I think that the idea that the younger Avengers had, that their older counterparts were always smarter and wiser and better leaders, and didn't have feet of clay. I think that's all kind of gone away for these kids. I think that their reaction to some of the decisions and some of the choices made during Civil War II has driven them towards sort of seeking their own path rather than necessarily following the paths of those ahead of them who have let them down quite a bit.
Tom, anything to add to that?
Well, I think that's sort of it in a nutshell. These are characters that are going to be looking to find their own way and to sort of reclaim and redefine, in sort of a classic sense, what being a superhero means or should mean as they understand it. Rather than having seen the previous generation as these sort of icons who came before them, now they've dealt with and interacted with them on a one-to-one basis and really learned that they're not really any better or worse than anybody else. And so if anybody is going to be the kind of role models and shining beacons that they thought those characters were, it's kind of down to them to do that.
Now, just as an interesting follow-up to that, something just dawned on me. Every one of these characters, to a certain extent, is a legacy hero. Is that sort of something that you guys planned when sort of hammering out this mission statement?
I think it's certain, not so much in terms of the mission statement didn't come from the cast. The cast, if anything, came, coming out of the mission statement. Some of that is just that we're at a point in the development of the Marvel Universe we have a whole bunch of younger characters and legacy characters and characters we haven't seen interact and be together in a meaningful way, but who carry some of the weight of the biggest icons of the Marvel Universe. So, in coming out of Civil War and in hitting on the idea for this Champions team, these were all characters that we thought would fit well and would impact nicely. It's also not to say that these are necessarily the only characters that will be in the book, or that any of these characters necessarily will be in the book forever. This is our starting point, but maybe not to the extent of the Avengers, who change rosters on a fairly consistent basis. But I'd imagine that as things go along, we have the potential for roster shifts and shakeups as new people come in and as old people fall out for one reason or another. Because I think it's easier to say you want to stand for and represent a certain thing, and it's a much harder thing, as these kids will find out through the course of their adventures, to actually do that when faced with actual on the battlefield sorts of life or death decisions.
So you touched on post Civil War II a little bit, so I want to touch on that a little bit more as much as we can, because we've still got a bunch of issues left to go. But there's a new team out there in the world who sort of are rejecting the ideals of the older Avengers in after Civil War II. So how are the older teams and the sort of established Avengers going to see them? And I'd especially love to hear from you, Mark, considering you're also going to be writing Avengers come October, or come November, excuse me.
Right. I think I honestly think the easy answer to that would be, well, they're looking at these kids as, oh, you kids, you'll learn. But that's not really the case. I think that all of the heroes in the Marvel Universe, regardless of where they came down during Civil War, are re-examining what they thought, what they felt, how they act, how they behave, what their responsibilities are. And so I think to a large extent that I'd like to play off as an Avengers. It's less a sense of sort of condescending, oh, those kids, when will they learn? And more like, well, they're worth keeping an eye on because they are the future. And that very much plays into the vision and vision connection. Obviously, that is the tightest connection among all the heroes, and we will, we'll be spending some time and some space on that. But it's a really long answer to your question. I guess the short answer is the Avengers are both sort of curious and proud, more so than just skeptical, although there is some skepticism there as well.
And Tom, we've seen a little bit of Miles, Sam, and Nova's, response to Civil War II in the main book. So when coming out of this, how do you see them fitting into this new team and the team's place in the post-Civil War II Marvel Universe?
Well, I don't know that I could talk too much about place in the post-Civil War universe because we're not quite there yet. This isn't something that was brought to any of them. This is something that was started and instigated by them. So they're very much at the forefront and the core of this idea and this movement, and it certainly grows out of the things that they saw and experienced during Civil War II. So it's not to say that any of them is necessarily the leader per se, but in terms of gathering this bunch of heroes and kind of figuring out and going forth with this sort of a mission statement, this sort of reclamation of what heroism, and particularly costume vigilantism, superheroing means in the Marvel Universe. It's a self-motivated mission. So this isn't somebody coming and saying, "Hey, kid, you're an Avenger now. You're good enough to be in the A-Team." This is them sort of perceiving a need and having a desire for change and wanting to be the change that they want to see in the world.
You mentioned the team not really having an out-and-out leader. We saw in the preview we released Ms. Marvel sort of being the first to splinter off Is there going to be sort of a leadership struggle at some point? You know, some of the characters on the team, in Viv's case, have never been on a team. Some have led teams. In Cyclops' case, others are more solo heroes. Are we going to see some sort of, you know, teen angst arguing over who's in charge kind of a thing?
Oh, I would think that there's at least 3 people on this team who would automatically assume they are the leader. I mean, you know, Ms. Marvel would assume she's the leader because it's her idea. Amadeus Cho would assume he's the leader because he's the smartest. Cyclops would assume he's the leader because he has the most experience by far in leading other teams. So while I certainly don't want to make the book about that, it certainly will play in and less about, you know, I don't anticipate a bunch of formal debates about it within the team and a lot of gavel banging and a lot of, you know, Robert's Rules of Orders debate about it. I just envision that there's going to be some hurt feelings here and there, but not to the point where anybody walks away petulantly necessarily, although if anybody were, it would be Amadeus.
Okay, so I wanted to ask you guys both about the first arc. I remember when we first announced the series, you guys said that if they were fighting the Circus of Crime by issue 4, you guys had failed your job.
Right.
So, you know...
Circus of Crime in issue 5.
Yeah, issue 5.
Yeah.
Choo! You know, we made a big to-do about Change the World and their mission statement. So what can you say, if at all, about sort of what their opening mission is going to be, how they're going to go about doing that, and what kind of threats they'll be up against?
I think the opening...
Go ahead.
Go, Mark, go ahead.
No, go.
Now, I think the opening... and I look at it less as an arc and more as a trade paperback, because in a very real way, issue 1 is issue 1. Like it's a single, self-contained. It doesn't end particularly with a cliffhanger, although there is a springboard into the next issue. You know, but the first trade paperback's worth of material, the first 6 or so, is really about them figuring out what it is they're doing and should be doing and how to do it. And also about how the idea of being champions and putting forward this, this sort of a new take on, the classic question of what defines a superhero, takes on a life of its own, becomes a sort of, a grassroots meme that goes out, beyond just the superhero community and out to the wider community. And actually becomes something that they very quickly lose control of. It's less about we have a great villain to pull out in issue 4.
Not the Circus of Crime, as we've established.
It's not the Circus of Crime. So much as it is them trying to figure out how to do this thing that they're trying to do, and what the best way to go about it is, and even what sorts of things. They can, intercede in and make a difference in. They're going to have really big eyes, and the question is whether they've got the stomach to chow down on, what the eyes see and want to do. And so that's really what the first arc is about. It's sort of defining what is this team? What's it all about? What do they do? How are they different from the Avengers or the Inhumans or the X-Men or whomever? How are they different even in how they operate, how they go about things? So again, it's less about there's this specific villain and they're gonna fight him.
Mark, anything else to add?
That sums up. No, that sums it up pretty nicely. I mean, again, we will see villains as we go. We will see, some traditional sort of Marvel challenges down the road. But right off the bat, it is a question of, what are they doing? They're not out to fight crime, although certainly if they saw a bank robbery going on and mass robbers were walking out with big sacks with dollar bill signs painted on them, they would stop it. But they're not out to fight crime. They're out to deal with kind of street-level stuff that the Avengers and the new Avengers and the, some of the other big teams don't deal with on a regular basis. And I say street crime, when I say street level, I don't mean necessarily muggings. I just mean in terms of how do you make the world a better place? What if you were, it's an international team. It will be, or at least the team will be international in scope. So if you've got a bunch of kids, for instance, who build an app to help out drought victims in India, and someone's out to stop that for whatever reason, well, that's not much to punch there. There's not a supervillain there as much as there is, some sort of corporate injustice going on there, or global injustice. If you're dealing with, with arms races, if you're dealing with international conflicts, especially those that involve young people, how do you do that in a way that is effective without suggesting that there is some simple answer to it, like, if only superheroes showed up, all the world's problems would be solved. And so that's a lot more what we're into, is the idea that the Champions is less a team of superheroes and more of a movement that these heroes are the symbol of.
That's great. Before we open it up to press on the call, I wanted to talk to you guys about. I wanted to hear from you guys both about Humberto. Mark, I mentioned before, you've had long runs with him in the past on teenage superheroes, and I know you guys reunited last year for an issue of S.H.I.E.L.D., but what is it sort of like reuniting with him on a bit of a longer project?
Oh, it's great. I mean, the energy is there on every single page. Every single panel has characters acting. I mean, acting, not just standing there because they've got lines to say, and they're interacting with each other. And there's a level of energy that Humberto brings to these characters that is unlike anything anybody else out there is doing. You ask a lot of guys, you ask a lot of younger artists who their influences are, and Humberto's on that list every time. And I couldn't be happier to be reunited with him.
Now, Tom, as an editor, what do you see him bringing to the project?
Well, among other things, right now, and hopefully people can tell this from the 4 pages that we previewed. But at least to me, it certainly seems like Humberto is really energized and really enthusiastic about the work he's doing on this book. He's definitely enjoying playing with these characters. They feel like they're very much in his wheelhouse. He certainly enjoys drawing Spider-Man in any iteration, so not Peter, who he's done a lot of. He loves doing Spidey stuff. His work has always been excellent. It's always got a lot of bounce and a lot of, for lack of a term, youthfulness that's kind of appropriate to the book, and is kind of nice because he can do, lighter, more fun stuff, but he can also do stuff that's a little darker and more creepy, and people tend to lose sight of that. And Champions is going to be a book where you kind of need to be able to push both buttons or put both pedals. And in the course of the first issue, Humberto really showed that he can do that. On top of which, he's among the most reliable artists in the field right now.
Counts for a lot.
It counts for an awful lot, and he's not shy about his work ethic. If he's got to put in late hours and long weeks to get the job done, he is always right there and willing to go the extra yard. That's an excellent thing to have just in the arsenal in terms of being able to keep consistency for a longer run before you have to bring in somebody else or another artist to do an arc or whatever. And a Harvey Award winner as of this weekend.
Oh yeah,
as of this weekend, yes.
So with that, I'll open it up to press, and we'll go around. We got time to probably go around twice. So let's start with George, Newsarama.
Hey guys. So right at the top of the call, Chris, you mentioned that these are not the Avengers; they're very specifically the Champions, and that's definitely a choice that they make. Why did they decide to use the name the Champions? And was there ever a thought to making them the Young Avengers or something like that?
I don't know if there was ever a thought of making them the Young Avengers. I think that the name Champion sort of springs up purely organically from from the way the team assembles at the end. It's not sitting there with a giant list of names trying to come up with the right one. It's one that sort of is blurted out by Kamala and then ends up being adopted by social media almost immediately.
Yeah. Also, in a larger sense, as you know, all of these characters are kind of looking to, you know, forge their own footprint and be their own people. They're not likely to pick up the name of the past generation with whom they're trying to create a certain degree of distance. So them being the young Avengers or the young whomever it was never really a consideration. You know, these guys aren't the new Warriors, and they're not the young Avengers. They're the champions. Unfortunately, we can call them the champions because somewhere we have a list of like 40 really bad names that they could have been if we were not able to clean that situation up such that we could use it. But champions, it feels like the right sort of name. Like it's a very classic superhero-y sort of moniker for a team. You hear it and you get a sense as to who and what these characters are about without even knowing anything else about them. So I think it's very fitting to the group. And you know, again, the proof will be in the comic when it comes out. But it was fortuitous that we were able to reacquire its use for this.
Brett, CBR.
Yes, hello. I was wondering, how specifically politically aware will the book be? Will you be citing things that we see happening in our own headlines, or will it be more evergreen-type stuff?
I think we can thread the needle. I think that the danger of doing stuff that is directly ripped from headlines exactly dates pretty quickly. And I think, but that said, I think Tom and I are pretty much on the same page about this. What superhero comics do really well is take the world outside your window, the real things that are going on, and make allegories out of them, sort of superhero them up, if you will, sort of recast them in superhero terms, but still dealing with the same emotions, the same frustrations, the same injustices that we're dealing with on a regular basis. You know, I don't know that you would do a Marvel story on Ferguson, for instance, because that gives the impression that the people there who are really on the ground, the flesh and blood people who are really there on the ground dealing with something like that somehow trivializes what they're accomplishing. At the same time, you can take a situation like that and you can make an allegory out of it, and you can have our characters come down on one side or the other, or in many cases, you know, on both sides, depending upon where their mindset is, and deal with the bigger questions. I would sooner run that direction than run toward the Circus of Crime or the Juggernaut, if you will. Tom, anything to add?
No, I think you're spot on there. We do agree on that. So, you know, while the things the champions are getting involved with, you know, won't be alien to the headlines of the day, they'll all be sort of, you know, couched within a superhero idiom because, you know, for all that, you know, we're trying to tell meaningful stories to the readership of today. This isn't a pandemic; it's a superhero action adventure comic book, and you know, we're going to deliver a good helping of that on top of the social relevancy that may be underneath it. So everything will kind of be couched in a superhero allegory.
But still very much the book's DNA. I mean, that is where I start my stories. Is not thinking about what villain do they have to fight this month, or who in the Circus of Crime can we put forth, but rather looking at the headlines, going over that morning's headlines about what's happening in the world in terms of racial issues, in terms of, you know, LGBTQ problems, in terms of
who does Mark want to yell at on social media? That's right, the starting point for most stories.
That's right. Who do I want angry at me this month? That's what I want to put in my story. Exactly. Yeah.
Man, the Circus of Crime are taking a beating today.
I know. Someday, by the way, I'm going to take it. I'm going to finally get my chance to recast them as Cirque du Crime, which is going to be my real goal. And then then we'll see who's laughing. Then we'll see.
Hey guys, having Cyclops as part of the team, and given the fact that he comes originally from a different generation of younger people. I hate millennials, but I'll use it for shorthand. Would his point of view be in conflict with the other modern champions?
I think so. I think he'd probably be a little bit more tending to lean toward authority or authority figure. I think he'd be a little less skeptical of authority. Not that this Cyclops came from 1963 anymore, but but still he did come from some years past.
Mm-hmm.
But not radically. I mean, I think that's a very good question, and in fact, until you asked it, I will freely admit I hadn't given it as much thought as I'm going to give it now. So, thank you, John.
Cool.
Yeah, I think too, it's worth understanding that, again, without spoiling stuff that'll be in the actual book. To young Cyclops, what this group represents is a real chance to break with his past, or break really with his future. That having come present and having seen the choices that he made over the course of his life and what became of his older self and what his older self turned into, which was kind of a shocking thing, in that very sort of quintessential classic way that every teenage kid goes, I don't want to turn into my parents. For Cyclops, that's a lot more personal. I don't want to turn into myself. And so, when he becomes aware of this movement, this drive towards the champions, there's something in it that speaks, very dramatically and very primally to him, and he's drawn to it as much because it appeals to him, and as much because it's a movement away from, what his sort of foretold destiny was. That if he's not careful and he makes the wrong move or all the same moves that he made in the past, he's going to turn into that awful guy that he doesn't like, and that everybody is constantly like seeing him and pointing to and going, "You're that guy who did all that awful stuff." It's a tough thing for him to be under, and the champions sort of offer him a little bit of a remedy or a different direction in his own personal life, apart from being the sort of first among equals among the mutant community and the X-Men.
Cool.
Comicbook.com.
I was wondering what kind of, if the champion's name goes kind of viral like you said that it will, what kind of reaction will that get from some of the members of the original Champions team, if they acknowledge it at all?
I'm sure we may get there eventually at some point. It's certainly not going to be something that we're jumping towards very quickly, if only because nobody in a Marvel comic has really called them the Champions in a long time for a lot of reasons. And I'm not, for all that we're doing a lot of Champions variant covers and things that evoke the sort of classic Marvel history of the name. To me, this is a new book. It's a new group with a new mission statement, and so maybe the Angel would show up and go, "Hey, I got a trademark on that, kids. You really got to pay me a royalty." Chances are, though, he's going to be in the middle of whatever Cullen Bunn X-Men stuff is going on and not paying that much attention. I'm sure at some point we'll address it because we'll run into one or another of those characters, and it'll just depend on what the interaction is. How a Hercules or how a Black Widow or how a Johnny Blaze might react to this. But it's not like any of them have used the name since 1977 or whatever passes for that these days. So I think any claim that they may have had is expired at this point.
Jesse, IGN.
So I think of all the team, Vision is the most interesting addition for me. I'm curious what the appeal is with her, what you think she brings to the team dynamic, and if you're intimidated at all taking over her after what Tom's been doing on the Vision comic.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, Tom is a great writer, and that's been my favorite Marvel comic for the last 11 months. It is intimidating, but we've been working very closely with him to make sure that the voice is consistent, to make sure the character is consistent, and he's been very generous with allowing his time to talk about it and without sort of laying any claim to the character that is proprietary. I think that in terms of the team itself, I think she's just an interesting get because she's the last one I think she's the last one we decided on, and I think that she was the last one that would have occurred to us. But I like the idea of a character who has so little written about her at this point that it gives us a chance to really help add to who she is and what she is, and with Tom's blessing, gives us a chance to really define her in her own terms.
George, Newsarama.
And scene. So aside from the circus of crime, is there any specific threat that you can tease us with that's coming up? I know you mentioned some things like arms dealers and international conflicts. Is there what's the mission that kicks off this whole thing? There's a mission in issue 1 that is more about human trafficking than anything else, but with a very perverse twist to it. I don't know how much more we want to give away than that at this point.
Yeah, I think there's not much more we can say at this point in terms of. I mean, it's a fair question for something like this, but I don't know that there's much more we can say at this point until the book actually comes out. Sorry.
Brett, CBR.
This is a book starring all teens, and so far Mark's work at Marvel, you've written Daredevil, you've written Indestructible Hulk, and now you kind of add half adults, half teens with Avengers. Now you're all teens. Does that worry you at all? How are you keeping up to date? Or
You're missing my launch from 2017, Baby Avengers. You're overlooking that as well. There's something about writing young characters that just appeals to me. I think that some of it is because I have read 10,000 comic books, and while I have enjoyed almost all of them, writing younger characters feels like there's a little more flex, a little more give, a little more opportunity to tell stories that I haven't read before. That's part of it. I also dealing with younger characters like this and putting them in situations that they're not used to. I get to really play around with the first time that this character meets that character, or this character encounters this sort of situation, and those are a lot of fun to write. Those kind of situations.
Your Marvel career has reverse Benjamin Button disease.
Exactly. Yes.
John, word balloon.
Mark, do you think? We know that millennials, and forgive the shorthand, but younger people today have a louder voice in today's society. Does it make writing these kind of superhero team comics different than the social relevance of the Teen Titans? Certainly your Legion of Superhero run was different because it was a future trying to emulate a past way of doing things. But, do those voices today, I mean, is that part of your process in terms of writing this kind of young people's team?
Yeah, I'd be lying if I said it wasn't, because here's the thing. The beauty of social media, as much as it is a double-edged sword, the beauty of social media is it gives a voice to people who, for the longest time, have been without a voice. And I listen to that, and I want to hear that, and I think it's important for me as a writer and as a person to listen to what all that is about. It doesn't mean I have to listen to everything. It doesn't mean that everybody's right. It doesn't mean that everybody out there who is crusading for this cause or that cause always has a point of view that is worth listening to, but by and large, they do. And by and large, they are making me think about things that as a white male comics creator, I'm not always thinking about. And that's a very important part of this book because, again, I don't want these to be the problems of white kids in America. That's, there's a lot of, there's been a lot of comic books written about that. I'd rather write about stuff that is, as you say, a little more reflective of what we're hearing and seeing younger people feel as we enter the 21st century full bore.
Was that part of the origin of this the team itself, Tom? Sorry, a follow-up.
You blew my follow-up line, which is fine.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. That's fine. All I had was something stupid to say, as usual. I think it was, the origin of the team really came from, again, even less about the world at large and the fact that there is this new voice among young people, so much as these characters had become such a strong part of the Marvel Universe in itself. We only brought them into Avengers like a year ago, and yet they and the other characters that have been around, seemed like, there was really something going on there, something to them that made them deserve to be a thing unto themselves and not just sort of an adjunct or an appendage onto the existing characters. So I don't know that I was specifically motivated by the fact that there's now a greater ease with which people of that generation make their voices heard. Although, like anybody, I hear a certain amount of that, so it's somewhere in my consciousness. So much as it was, I think that these were all characters that people dug and were responsive towards, and there was an opportunity to do more and bigger with them.
I should also point out that these characters are now such a big part of the Marvel Universe, part and parcel because young people have responded to them so well. Right. So it's interesting to see that come full circle and see us sort of promoting it in a way direct to them. Jamie, comicbook.com.
Yeah, I guess following up from that last question, when you started writing all different Avengers, did you always have an eye towards spinning these younger characters off into an independent unit, or is that a direct result of the response from fans during the run of All New Avengers?
It's a combination of two things. It is less about any grand plan I had. It is more a combination of the reception that those three have enjoyed as team members, coupled with the fallout of Civil War, and again the natural outgrowth of why they are leaving the Avengers because of the events of Civil War.
Yeah, certainly when we started All New, All Different Avengers, we didn't know we were going to be here a year and a half later. This wasn't like the plan. We'll put them in Avengers for a year and a half and then we'll spin them out. We put them into Avengers because we thought that they would be a good component of a new, more modern, more Marvel Now-y Avengers team. And they were, and so much so that maybe there's more to do with them and more specific and more distinct to do with them, where their voices are in the lead and not either part of the chorus or really almost sort of part of the backbench, where it's really, Captain America or Iron Man or even Thor, who's kind of at the forefront of pushing forward what the mission is and what the goal is. And they're there to take part in it like any Avenger, but not really to be driving the situation. That there's an opportunity we found, particularly with the schism in Civil War and the aftermath of that, again, for them to really become their own thing and stand on their own 2 feet and to, sort of come out from being Avengers. But, if you had come to me 18 months ago and said, oh, yeah, we're going to put them in the book for a year and a half and then we're going to take them back out, I'd have been fighting that tooth and nail. I'd either been going, well, why am I putting them in the book to begin with? We're just going to take them out again. Or the heck you're going to take them out. We're putting them in. We're going to keep them in. Fortunately, I was part of the conversations that got us here, so I didn't really have to be convinced. I was one of the people doing the convincing. So, that was nice for a change.
Jesse, IGN.
So you've already talked about what Cyclops brings to the team, but I'm curious, with so many other young X-Men characters out there and so many characters that could have filled that role, were there any others that you considered in place of Cyclops, or was he always your first pick?
He was my first pick, man. I love Cyclops. I've loved Cyclops ever since I started reading X-Men comics back in 1966. And part of the reason I love him is for the same reason that everybody has their favorite indie garage band that they love that nobody else has ever heard of, and you have to convince them of the fact that you have to convince your friends they're good. I think he's such an underdog that I'm drawn to that, and I want to make people like Cyclops as much as I do. So he was my very first pick. That said, you're going to see, in the course of the first issue, you're going to see a pretty good survey of some of the other young characters throughout the Marvel universe who could very easily drift in and out of the Champions in that first issue. But yeah, Cyclops forever, man. That's my motive.
That was definitely Mark's first pick and almost only pick. And it's funny because I'm a huge Cyclops fan. Cyclops is my favorite X-Man as well. We're the only two guys who feel this way, apparently. Mark suggested it at the first retreat where we were talking about this, and I thought to myself, "Oh no, that's a bad idea. We shouldn't do that. That's really going to screw things up in a bunch of different ways." And so it took me a little while to come to grips with it in my own head. And I'm very glad that we ended up here because he's a great character to have in the book. And I think Mark will do wonders for people who have not liked Cyclops over the course of the last X number of years in making you understand what it is about that character that we find so appealing. And just putting him in a situation that's completely different from any situation you've really seen him in before, that for all of his entire 50-plus year history, really, Cyclops has been, for lack of a better term, the Captain America of the X-Men. That while other characters have, kind of gone outside of the world of X books and, may have been on other teams or been in situations that were not X-centric or mutant-centric, Cyclops was always sort of the poster child for Xavier's dream and a particular flavor of that dream, even though that flavor changed over the course of time. And so just putting him in a different situation with different people and with this different outlook suddenly, lets you open up a whole new vistas of things that potentially could be of interest with this character. We didn't really specifically think of other X-Men per se. We thought of about a bunch of other characters, but like Cyclops was the first guy on the bus. Mark could not have wanted him more for this.
Yeah. All right, we got time for maybe one or two more. George, Newsarama.
Speaking of specific members of the team, Amadeus Cho obviously gone through some pretty traumatic stuff recently with the death of Bruce Banner. Is that going to be kind of a driving force in his role on this team? Is he going to have an outlook that's kind of based on, what's happened to him recently? And will that set him at odds with any of the other team members?
It'll certainly inform. Go ahead. Actually, Tom, take this one, please.
Okay. I think it's certainly something that's obviously, at the front of his mind. But going back to his very first appearance, Amadeus has fairly consistently had a distrust of authority, a sense of his own sort of self-importance and self-directiveness, and a desire to help the underdog and to be the underdog. It's one of the reasons why he bonded so well with the Hulk and sort of chose the Hulk as his own personal hero. And why he got along so well with Hercules for all those months. There's a line in one of the upcoming issues of Totally Awesome Hulk that Greg Pak wrote, where, and to me this kind of crystallized the character in my head, where somebody tells Cho that, Banner's Hulk was motivated and driven by anger, but Cho's Hulk is driven by pride. And I think that's kind of the summation of this character. He knows he's one of the smartest people in the world. He believes in his own judgment, and his own his own sort of destiny, although that's kind of a grandiose word for it. And now he's actually got the physical power to back that up. And the question really is, at this point, what, having all of that, what do you choose to do with it? It's one thing to say the guys that have this power and have had it in the past haven't done well with it, or you could do better, but now you've got to walk the walk and not just talk the talk. And, has he really thought this stuff through as far as he could? Certainly, the fact that Bruce was killed is a good motivator to unite him with the other kids who are feeling a little bit let down by their role models and the characters, who have sort of they've based their superhero persona on. But I don't know that he's going to be carrying such specific anger about it, at least outside of particular incident, that where it's going to be a huge issue for anybody else.
All right, we got time for one more. Brett, CBR, take us home.
Okay, you talked so much about how this is going to be kind of a new type of team. It's more of a movement than a team. So I'm wondering, are we going to still have, like, the great superhero tropes of, like, a headquarters, a jet, like, all that stuff? Or is the structure of this book really drastically different?
That is a great question, and it gives us a chance to talk about something we haven't talked about yet, which is that a big part of what these kids are going to be doing is really putting all those tropes under the microscope and sort of, if they have to reinvent the wheel, they'll reinvent the wheel. But if there's stuff that makes sense that has happened in the past, they'll keep going that way. But I'm not just talking about things like how much sense does it make to keep a secret identity in the 21st century, or how one goes about keeping a secret identity, or where do we need a headquarters in a world in which we all live pretty virtually anyway? It's also a chance to put under the microscope questions like, okay, why don't we kill people as superheroes? I mean, I know the reason, you know the reason, we know the reason because it's always been that way. But and these kids believe very strongly that killing is wrong. But why? It's a fair question to ask if you're dealing with megalomaniacal despots with blood on their hands. It's a very fair question to ask. What are our responsibilities? In terms of property damage, in terms of collateral damage, in terms of cleanup, in terms of how do we serve the world more than just dealing with the immediate danger? How responsible are we for dealing with whatever fallout there may be from our presence? These are all questions these kids have to answer, and they're going to answer them in their own way, and they're going to put them all, like I said 6 times, unfortunately, under the microscope, because I couldn't think of a better analogy.
That is a really good place to end, as a matter of fact. But before we go, Tom, do you have anything else to add?
I think we hit it pretty well.
Mark, anything from you?
I don't think so. I think we've done pretty well.
Huh?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so thank you to everybody for joining us. Thank you to Mark for taking some time to chat with us, and Tom, you as well. Champions #1 is going to be in stores on October 5th as the sort of official kickoff to Marvel Now. So I hope everybody reads it and checks it out. And thanks a lot, guys. I'll talk to you all soon.
Great. Thanks very much, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
There we go. 2 of the more recent Marvel press conferences brought to you, and happy to have you be a fly on the wall as we're all talking to these creators and editors. And I appreciate it, Marvel. Thank you very much. It's been incredibly nice that they let the Word Balloon podcast in on these things, and I think it gives you guys kind of an inside locker room view of the creative process in a way that just our straight-up interviews don't. It's interesting to see them put their public face out there and promote these books, and then go around the core, and people get to ask them questions. So thank you, Marvel, and thank you for listening to today's Word Balloon. All brought to you by InStock Trades at InStockTrades.com. Where how about Thor by Jason Aaron and Russell Dodderman. Hardcover Volume 1. It's been an excellent run. 512 pages in this hardcover. It's 50% off. It's $17.49. You can get the Star Wars Deluxe Hardcover Volume 1 with the great Stuart Immonen cover. This is Jason Aaron and John Cassidy and Simone Bianchi and Stuart Immonen doing some wonderful work. It is 50% off, and it's $17.49. It's honestly, we're all Star Wars fans, but isn't it great that there are great Star Wars and Star Trek comic books happening right now? I'm telling you, I just love it. See, I couldn't get away without saying at least something about Star Trek, even when talking about Star Wars. My buddy Jeff Parker and David Hahn did a very great tie-in of Batman 66 and The Man from U.N.C.L.E. Two of my favorite 60s things, all rolled up in one great story, and Parker is the man to tell the story, and David Hahn gives us beautiful art. Wow, I love this story. 50% off, $9.99. From my buddy Tom King, who just recently won a Harvey Award, and Barnaby Bagenda. The Omega Men, the full collection. Great story, 45% off, $13.74 for that wonderful book. That and a hell of a lot more. I'm going to give you one more, by the way, because we mentioned with the Death of X, Secret Wars, Jonathan Hickman, Assad Ribic, tremendous event of late. The full 312 pages of Secret Wars can be yours, 42% off, $20.29 from InStockTrades.com. Check out all the details waiting for you at InStockTrades.com. Thanks for listening to Word Balloon. Thanks for tolerating my even deeper voice, because this is me in the morning on Friday putting this out for you. And I hope to see you at Cincy Comic-Con. I will be in better voice by the time to do these panels today. I'm talking to Brian Azzarello and Marty Pasco today. Poor Mark Waid under the weather and won't be able to attend Cincy Comic-Con, but I've got a whole slate of panels on Saturday and Sunday, and I'll be slowly doling them out throughout, I believe, September and October, in addition to our straight-up interviews. And maybe I'll do it that way to make sure that the panels get out there and you get to hear them and enjoy them on Word Balloon. Thanks very much. More coming up in the days ahead. Stick around. Listen to the feed. Check me out on Facebook and Twitter and wordballoon.com for updates on new episodes. And as always, thank you for listening. Thank you for your support and attention. Until next time, Word Balloon is a copyright feature of Shaky Productions, copyright 2016.